Welcome to the Freitas Effect Podcast, a show about everything and nothing where you might actually learn something. I am your co-host, Azeb Freitas.
And I am the other co-host, Simon Freitas. And this week, we are talking about the reason why things make you cringe. Why do we care about the things that make you cringe? Well, because we do. And we were curious about learning about new things, because, you know, everyone needs to learn something sometimes, and stagnancy sucks. And you know what else sucks? Cringy moments. So, Azeb, let's talk about it.
Honestly, this whole intro is cringe. But, so yeah, I was thinking about cringe culture because I remember a while back, Reddit had a whole subreddit that was dedicated to cringy shit. And I was like, why do people actually like to watch cringy shit? Because I was like, that's interesting that like people like doing it and it's low-key sadistic.
Yep.
So I wanted to get to the bottom of it, and I feel like maybe you guys would think it's interesting too. So, what are some cringy things that we all universally find cringy? Like, sounds-wise, you know, there's the sound of bees in scary movies, or babies crying, like, things that just make us uncomfortable, or, like, seeing pus and, like, how it's nasty. For me, I don't really like watching mukbangs, but other people do.
Oh, my God.
Things that just don't belong together, like scrambled eggs and ketchup. I'm sorry, I'm saying it.
I'm not sorry.
Or like raisins and potato salad.
What?
Like, we should all just agree that that should not be there. Or we could get real graphic and nasty.
Oh, God.
Bring it back to the early 2000s.
Trigger warning.
Where 2 girls in 1 cup and blue waffle and Dr. Pimple Popper, which is like still a thing now. Ooh. And like, why? Just why? It's just not. It's not right. But before we get deeper into this, Simon, would you like to define what cringe is?
Yes, and so, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, cringe is a verb. It is an intransitive verb because it's 2021, and we are being articulate about what kind of verbs we are doing. And so, the cringe is to recoil in distaste, shrink in fear or civility. I did not say that right. Servility? I don't know what the fuck that is.
What does that mean?
Maybe like a snake?
Do we have to look up a word within a word?
We're gonna do it after. Or to draw or contract one's muscles involuntarily.
Okay,
so,
that makes sense.
Servility. I mean, I know Pokemon, there's one called Servile, and that's a snake. So it's like, maybe it's like...
Like slithery? Like,
yeah.
Like that way? I wish you guys could see my hand.
Am I spelling this right? I am so good at spelling.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, servility. According to the Oxford Dictionary, an excessive or willingness to serve others?
Oh, like service. So let's go back to what it was actually saying.
Where did you go, Miriam?
To shrink in fear or service?
Oh, okay. Like kind of to shrink in reaction, like as like a service
like
of whatever's happening. Yeah.
Look at us learning new words.
Intransitive verbs.
Word of the week. Servility.
Servility in the middle of the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
We have to like
cringe.
use it. Can you use it in another sentence?
Oh, of course we can use it in a sentence.
You can't look it up. You have to make up a sentence right now.
Google gave me the sentence. All right. Civility. I was experiencing civility in corporate America, and so I cringed my life. Was that good?
No.
Damn.
It has to be like,
well,
in servility, I passed you a bottle of water.
Well, look at you.
Right?
Miriam would be proud.
Oh, wow. Cheers. Cheers.
I obviously don't know. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers away.
All right.
Well, thank you, Simon. You obviously have passed the spelling bee.
Oh, okay, go.
Yes. But you were saying if you had a glass of wine.
Oh, I was just saying, yes, this is the time to take a sip. We had cheers to.
Yeah, honestly, if you guys listen to this show, you can make it a drinking game, and every time we drink, you can drink.
Yes.
You know, just post a selfie of you, like, drinking wine while you're listening to the show and tag us, and then we'll just, like, we'll also take a shot every time you post it.
I love it. Yes, we have to. Legally blind.
No matter what time of day it is.
Of course.
Any day of the week.
The episode drops at midnight, so 2 a.m. if I get that snap, you know?
Yeah, we out here. You just gotta tag us.
All right, we ready to start skirting into the next piece of this episode?
So you already know the motherfuckers.
The turns have tabled. On this week's episode of How the Turns Have Tabled, we are talking about some cringy ass shit. So, let me take you back into high school. One of the worst times of your life. Middle school is truly the worst, but guess what? This story's the intersectionality of both those times.
Hey-o.
Hey, and even fucking worse. Latin club in high school.
Aw, yeah.
The biggest fucking losers on earth, because most of us were also in the marching band. So,
Hey.
And we're like so cool out of the Latin club kids.
Hierarchy on the cool chain.
Socioeconomic what is that?
Honestly, it's just like if you were like...
Social status.
Yeah. Whatever it is.
Things.
Don't mess up the status quo.
Well, I was fucking everything up.
Oh, I thought you said I was fucking everything.
No,
I was like, what was you touching?
No one was touching me. I was like 300 pounds. Anyways.
Go back and listen to our fat shaming and body shaming episodes.
You love yourself, but no one was loving me.
Oh my god. This episode is chaos.
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Cringe. But we were touring a Latin club play. Just think about that. A touring Latin play. No one wants to watch this. For middle schoolers.
I'd pay to see that.
You would, because you care. But like 6th to 8th graders, you know, they were only there because they didn't have to be in class. And so, imagine this. You know, all this possible cringe energy going around. How could I possibly be the one fucking cringiest thing going around to all these schools? Well, I'll answer that question for you. I was not preparado, and it was just a bad bad productions. So the script, I had not read it until like we were on our way, and I obviously had no lines memorized, and I had to point to where Rome was in the middle of the play. And I had no fucking idea where to point. So I pointed about 8 different directions in front of everybody. And then the guy who was playing Julius Caesar was like, nope, we're going this way. So in the middle of the play, I just said, and like under my breath, so I thought no one could hear me, like, ah, shit. And then everyone started giggling. And I was like, oh, they must be laughing at something else, right? No. Every single little 6th grader heard me fucking whisper, aw shit, under my fucking breath. And we did not get welcome back to that fucking school. And then, following this, my phone was on. Like, the sound was on during the production. So, when we got to a later scene, I got a text message. And my notification at the time was a little sound that went, message. And it was hell. So I had horrible cringe moments. And to save yourself from these mementos, you can turn your fucking phone off in the theater and learn your goddamn lines, because you can really avoid cringy situations by just following the community standards.
Bitch, we're about to get into.
Yes.
So now getting right into it, y'all. So I did some research.
She can read.
I can read.
Literate.
Sometimes.
Most days.
So I found 3 articles. This one in particular is from the New York Times.
New York.
So just give me one moment so I can read what I wrote.
Read it.
So basically, like, while I was reading through this article, it touched on a couple of, like, random points, but it all comes together in the end, and it all's gonna make sense, I promise. But one of the first points that touched, like, really, like, impacted me was, it was talking about how a song can go viral only because everybody hates it. And I was like, hate watching or hate listening. But some examples of, like, people who are successful off of cringe culture is, like, the Cash Me Outside girl. I guess she's, like, a rapper now, but, like, not that anybody actually listens to her. But still, I mean, she's getting money.
Yep.
Or in most recent times, the Crate Challenge, high-key cringy. Because, like, what are we doing, y'all? But it's okay, because, like, you know, some of us were, in fact, successful. So like, these are things that are cringy, but give people, like, attention, I guess?
Yeah. Like,
that they still benefit off of, technically?
Yeah, because they're getting views and likes and their name out there.
Right, so, whereas, like, it can be embarrassing, I guess they're still winning?
In a way. I feel like it's a shame if you don't really feel ashamed, then you'll win. Like, you know, like... Yeah, like...
Yeah, I agree.
Because I feel like the girl, she was on Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, she went on there being like, everyone else in the audience is a hoe. And then it's like, okay, bitch. Like, you know, it's like, she could not be ashamed of herself. Otherwise, she just would not have ended up in that situation at all.
Yeah. And then it also, like, touched base on, like, cyberbullying, and I was like, wow, I totally forgot about this because I'm not in, like, 8th grade anymore. But, like, it really got into, like, defining what makes shit cringy and what doesn't, and, like, how that leads to cyberbullying or just, like, bullying in general.
True.
And so I really like their definition of saying, as a word that implicitly delineates between the clued in and the clueless, cringe also proves handy for those looking to advertise a superior moral or aesthetic refinement. And I was like, I love the aesthetics. But basically it was saying, like, what you find cringy or not is an identifier of your taste in cultural trends as an individual. So, for example, like, being like, I'm a hipster and I'm proud, and, like, claiming that's cringy. Because if you're a real hipster, you would never say that shit out loud. But real hipsters know that because they're in the know. So it's between the clued in and the clueless. Which, then they started talking about dad jokes, and then they gave, like, an example of, like, or the definition of dad jokes, and I was like, there are levels to this shit. And it was talking about, like, how, you know, dads are typically, like, not in touch with the time, so, like, when they say shit, it's cringy, but, like, that's what makes it a dad joke, and that's why it's funny. But what it said in the article was millennials often use the term as a wrist slap of pre-digital natives when they indulge in tone-deaf jokes or political opinions that never should have made it out of the 1980s. So it's kind of like when you watch The Office, and it's, like, cringe humor, which is, like, it's just so interesting. Like, that's literally why we watch the show.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, even, like, I know the British Office was a lot more dark humor, and, like, the way that they got the American Office to be more, I don't know, for us to actually like Michael Scott, like, you know, like, they created that relationship of, like, okay, well, he cares about people, but he's always gonna be fucking up, and we're always gonna watch him, like, just do the most for no fucking reason.
And, like, you can't look away. And that's why I was like, I want to find out why is it that we just can't look away at cringe. So yeah. And then there's, like, shows that we enjoy watching cringe, like America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah.
You know? And you, like, when you really start to think about what you're consuming, you're like, wow, a lot of the things that I watch are actually really cringy. Maybe it's just me. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like maybe y'all relate. If you listen to the show, maybe you do.
I mean, I remember back in, like, 6th grade when it was, what was that show on MTV with, like, the skateboarders that would
Ridiculousness?
wipe out? No, it was, like...
Scarred?
Scarred!
I loved that show.
We were I remember that and 1,000 Ways to Die, because it was just, like, gory, gruesome things that you just never would see anywhere else, and they're obviously, like, cringy because it's disgusting to look at, but you're just, like, holding onto the pillow, and then you're like, oh my god, look at the bone. But
yo, for real.
Yeah.
I always bring up that show, nobody ever remembers it, and I'm like, y'all didn't have, like, late night cable, I guess.
We hope you remember it. And if you don't Google it, you'll see some bad images.
I mean, you could Google it, we're all grown now.
We hope you're grown.
Yeah, please don't be, like, 12 and listening to the show. Just turn it off. Tell your cousin to listen. So, the other article that I found was by popsci.com. And it was talking about cringe as embarrassment science. And I was like, that is so cool to, like, reframe it. But basically it was saying, like, when somebody does something cringeworthy, it might be more about you than it is about them, of, like, why you're cringing. So it's because of, like, secondhand embarrassment and how we process, like, what we're seeing. So it's like when you're seeing somebody do something cringy, it's because you're imagining yourself doing that and deciding, like, okay, if I did that, would it be cringy? And that's what defines, like, what you find cringy or not.
Wow.
Right? Like, doesn't that make sense?
That resonates so deep with me, because I'm just thinking back on especially this, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Widows. Have you seen it, Azeb? Yeah. So you know that part
Love
where...
that movie. Great movie.
The two widows are crying about how they, like...
Wait, like, what's her name is in it?
It's... Oh, God, I don't know.
Viola Davis?
Yes!
And
Liam Neeson?
Yeah!
Yeah.
Oh, it's such
Definitely
a good
watch it.
movie!
It's so fucking good. But there's this one part where, like, one of the women that, like, is a widow, like, she's, like, sitting there with this guy who lost his wife, and they are just crying.
Oh, that is
and then
the cringiest
out of
scene.
nowhere, they just start making out. And in the middle of the theater, I was literally like... And my friend Henry was just, like, looking at me like, what is fucking wrong with you? But I was just like, maybe I'm just too high right now, but, like, this is no consent, what? Like,
I mean, it was definitely consensual. It was just confusing.
It was so great.
But also, like, that's,
know?
like, what grieving is. Like, grieving is just
Yeah.
confusing. And I guess they both were just like, okay, your life sucks right now, and my life sucks right now, but your life sucks way more, and I
we
want to
both-
console you, and we,
Yep.
like, don't know how else to console ourselves, and, like, maybe they were attracted to each other on a subconscious
And
level.
when's the last time either of them had physical touch?
Yeah, so they were
and
probably just like, let's make out right now.
just so much necessity.
and then they just, like, walked away and were like, all right, I gotta go.
Yep.
Because it was like, what are you doing?
Facts.
Yeah, so that's a moment of cringe.
But neither of us are widows, so we will never understand that.
Can't relate.
No.
Hashtag single. Oh
my God.
Single as a Pringle.
Pringles.
I'm fine with it, though, because, like, we chilling. Hey. So moving right along out of my love life into thewaddle.com.
Waddle.
This one was the best article that I read because it actually answered the fucking question that I am trying to get addressed.
What we need. Direction.
Sorry to waste your time for the past 2 articles.
Can't waste their time, 2K21.
Oh, waste your time forever.
Waste it.
That was a good one. White girl wasted. Chocolate wasted.
Stop.
All right, getting right back into it. Sorry, y'all. So in the first part of this article, I just want to read this excerpt because it's important. And it says, our visceral reaction to people embarrassing themselves is because of the way that the brain has adapted to social conditioning. So, back in cavemen times, it said that, evolutionary history has hammered us a need for community, considering, how prehistoric men died alone and or survived in packs, right? So, over time, this morphed into a rejection of those who did not adhere to social norms. So, if you didn't adhere to the social norms while you were a fucking caveman, you would be kicked out of the group.
Wow.
And that would then lead to this feeling of a gut feeling equivalent to culturally being disassociated. So that's why we get this feeling of embarrassment for someone else because they're not following what has been established as societally acceptable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where the feeling of cringe comes from is people not following what is normalized and isolating themselves because they don't follow the group norm or groupthink, etc. I just throw etc. in there sometimes.
etc.
So yeah. So basically what I just said. I hope you guys followed along.
Yeah. So it's genetically we've been conditioned to cringe.
Well, no, it's evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when cringe came about in evolutionary times, that was why. It was because people were doing things that were not normal, quote unquote.
And now it's in our DNA.
And now it's in our DNA of what's acceptable and what's not. And that's when we defined as a group oh, you're doing something different. You're weird.
Yeah.
So then that makes it cringy when you keep doing things.
Pain.
It gives you a feeling of uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Okay. So going forward, the psychologist says that gut feelings are not facts, right?
Ooh.
So this is where cringe is seen as an empathy response or something of contempt or compassion because it involves a necessity of experience. So you can't cringe without knowing what an embarrassing feeling feels like.
That makes sense.
Yeah, right? So now that we know as people what it feels like to be embarrassed, then we have this feeling of empathy, and that's what makes us uncomfortable because we're uncomfortable for that person because we feel bad for them. So that's why we cringe.
Yep.
Is because we feel bad for the person, and it comes from a place of empathy.
Or even that made me think of when kids will think something's gross or something and it's not actually gross and they have this visceral reaction. It's no, what? Oh, and then it's okay, you don't understand the societal norm yet. It's that maybe you can't have this actual reaction because, whatever room you're in or whoever you're around, but it's when an adult or as you're more developed, you really do realize what is cringeworthy and kind of distinguishing those things of the gut feeling not being fact, trying to align those two. That's where my mind
No,
goes.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. So then the other thing that the psychologist mentioned is cringe content exists for us to laugh at or to feel contempt with because it's a form of coping. But this empathy response comes from a place of self-hate.
Ooh.
That's why in the other article, when they said it might be more about you than it is about them, it's because when you're laughing, individuals are reassuring themselves they would never tolerate themselves in that situation.
Oh, wow.
So therefore, you're projecting insecurity when you're laughing at a cringy situation.
Oh my
You're laughing at your own deepest insecurity.
That makes so much sense.
Right?
Because the people who are the most insecure will always make stuff not about themselves. So it's when they see something happening that even they might resonate with, it's just oh yeah, haha, that's so horrible. No one does that.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, to get down to the end of it, this major point that I thought was important.
Muy importante.
It said the most common version of cringe is compassion cringe, which, I just think it's funny that there are so many levels of cringe. But word for word, it says the psychological...
Psychology.
I can't read. The psychological projection that inspires contemptuous cringe is a clear defense mechanism which arises from an ability to express one's complex emotions clearly. So, basically, the foil to this is constant self-questioning, self-awareness, critical thinking, and kindness, which applies to everything. So basically, just reflect and wonder, why are you cringing at that thing? And where is that coming from? And is that because of something that you've internalized, or is that because of something that is like actually embarrassing? So cringe compassion is when our response to something cringeworthy is a memory of your own failure. So a person who wishes they were treated better in that moment of shame will view others' failings with compassion. So I'm trying to think of an example of that. Maybe like when somebody's giving a speech and they're fucking up. And like you're sitting there like, okay, it's gonna be okay, or like, like in poetry where they're like, new shit, and like somebody like saying a poem and then like they're fucking up their poem and everybody starts snapping, and it's like, yeah, like, it's cringy that like it's embarrassing that like you're fucking up, but like the community is here to support you. Like that's cringe compassion.
Yeah. Or like when you forget the lyrics when you're singing something and then everyone in the audience is just like, okay, they're gonna keep going. Yeah. They're gonna finish the song. It's gonna be okay. Like
So that's like pretty much why we cringe.
Because we have an understanding of what social norms are, and it's the gut telling us to stay in line. Bah.
Like, yes, but also because if we get into our key takeaways, I can tell you more.
Take those keys.
Take the keys. So, cringe is actually a sign of growth.
Yay!
Yes. So, the spread of cringe in the 21st century is not a sign of a culture in a death spiral, but it's actually like something that's actually healing, because it is like cringe is implying that like when we see something like from our past that like we've actually done, like for example, whenever I look at like my old work of like any art that I've produced, I'm like, oh, that shit's nasty, but like it's not, obviously it's fine for whatever it is. I'm just like a harsh critic of myself,
being an artist. Yeah,
always, of literally everything I do, even probably this episode, but like but being able to recognize or catch yourself cringing at your own shit, or like at anybody or anything, is a sign of growth and healing, because it's a moment of you being like, oh, I would never do that again because I've grown from that.
Yeah,
it's like, or like I would never, or like that person is doing that because they don't know that they could be doing it this way, and that would be making it less cringy. Or it would be just making it better in general overall.
Facts.
Right?
Yes.
But yeah, so that's basically my key takeaway. Is there any other key takeaways that you would like to mention, Simon?
Yes. So this is going a little bit back on the caveman thing. I know when in a big... I mentioned Marching Man and Azeb mentioned the caveman. So I'm going to mention that guy. Have you ever heard of being that guy?
Yes.
Yeah. So cringing is being that guy. And as Andrew Jackson says in Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, I'm not that guy. But then he ends up being that guy. Oh, so like, watch the fuck out.
About?
Oh yeah, because then he ends up being like, I'm so that guy. Like, it all changes and comes back. So watch the fuck out. You never know when you're going to be that guy.
Yeah.
So cringeworthiness is all upon us.
Or you could just embrace it and just be cringe all the time.
Facts. Because cringe TikTok has already gotten me like so many fucking views. And stay the fuck off my TikTok if you love me. So
yeah.
Yeah. Because it's it's a sign of growth.
But you can watch the Freitas Effect TikTok.
Yes, you can.
And all of the fun little dance challenges we have coming up.
Watch. Scroll.
Speaking
Spend
of
your
that,
life on it.
we have announcements.
Yes.
Simon, do you have announcements, or should I just say my announcement?
You should announce your announcements.
Okay, so my announcement isn't much of an announcement. It's actually a challenge. So, I challenge y'all to watch the cringiest movie.
The worst.
It's the worst. And it is called 365 on Netflix. If you want to make it more cringy, watch it with somebody that you know.
365 days.
365 days. Yes. Watch it. Let us know if you watched it. And let me give you some context. So it's a love story. And it's actually...
Is it a love story?
It is a love story, baby girl.
Oh, you love baby girl.
It is based on... It was inspired by 50 Shades of Grey. Which, if you did not know, 50 Shades of Grey was inspired by Twilight. Which is also a cringy movie. So, all these movies inspire cringe. Therefore, you have to watch it.
It's a painful series.
Yeah, that's it. So that's my announcement.
So last month, Azeb ended our episode with I Might Want You Around. And this month, following the theme of saying fuck the sign off, because y'all know how to find our social medias, then we are going to be presenting you with not a cringy monologue, but a monologue about a cringy situation that I auditioned for a lot of things with. And, you know, some directors think I'm funny, so if you think I'm funny and you want to, like, pay me for things, just do it. You know, so I'm Freddie Productions.
You know, Cash App.
You know, Venmo.
Zelle.
Yeah, I got, you
PayPal.
can, like, eBay me.
You can just, like hit up my DMs.
I have, like, all my body parts on eBay. No, I'm just kidding.
You can
but
email me. Facebook me, LinkedIn me.
My social security number is but here's that monologue. It's at so I'll give you a little bit of context. It's at a party. This guy was trying to hook up with this girl and something went horribly wrong. So you're gonna find out what.
Okay, love you, bye.
Bye. I just fucking killed Chuck. I think. I mean, he's just laying out there. He's not moving. I don't think he's breathing. I mean, there I was, up on the roof with Marissa, talking, laughing, having a great time. I tell her, she reminds me of Sandra Bullock. I tell her, I loved Hope Floats. Who knew those would be the magic words? Next thing I know, her clothes are off and we're loosening roof shingles like there's no tomorrow, and then there's fighting and kissing and touching, and suddenly someone starts pounding on me. I mean, just beating on me and growling. Yeah, growling. And I look up and there's Chuck. And I'm like, what's the problem, dude? And he says, the problem is, dude, you're fucking my girlfriend. So I look at Marissa, and I'm like, you're someone's girlfriend? And she says no. Then it comes out, Chuck just wishes she was his girlfriend. She's actually his cousin or something. So he's got these feelings of guilt about wanting her. And then he starts crying. So that totally ruined the mood. Marissa puts her clothes back on. Climbs back through the window, back into the party, and I'm left with Chuck. Whining, blubbering, crying Chuck. And he starts in on how he's this total fuck up and how he should just throw himself off the roof. And for a split second, I'm thinking, yes, throw yourself off the roof, do it. But I don't say that. I say, you're gonna get a girl someday, buddy. Just maybe not your cousin, huh? And I give him a friendly pat on the back. A nice, manly slap on the back. And he looked heavy. Who knew he'd go flying? Who knew he'd go flying right off the roof?